You're listening to the Stone Church Podcast. This message was recorded live at our Davenport campus.
Well, if you don't know who I am, I am Pastor Terry Lynn, and I'm one of the pastors here at Stone. And it is my honor today to bring you the word. So we have been going through a series on Nehemiah, and we've been going through the story of Nehemiah together. And last week, we left off at a place where we finally see that some building has begun. They've officially started to build the wall. And there's progress happening. People are aligned. God's work is moving forward. And then opposition hits. Have you ever been there? You're doing what God has asked you to do. You're walking in obedience, and then something happens that just throws you off. Well, this is exactly what happened in Nehemiah chapter 4. We're going to read verses 1 through 3. It says, "When Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became furious. He mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria and said, 'What are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble?' Then Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, 'Indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they are building, he would break down their stone wall.'" God's work is moving forward, and then opposition shows up. It may look like this to you. You take a step toward God, and something pushes back. You decide to live differently, and someone notices. You start building something healthy, and something tries to tear it down. The fact is, in life and in faith, if you don't know this, opposition will come, especially in faith. But the thing is when opposition shows up, we are often tempted to respond and fight the way the world fights. With retaliation, a text back, a comment on social media, with defensiveness, or even with volume. In other words, we're tempted to fight dirty. But Nehemiah 4 shows us a different way. Nehemiah shows us how to stand strong without becoming reactive, how to face pressure without lessening our character, how to respond in a way that honors God above all and strengthens others. Nehemiah teaches us that when opposition comes, listen to this, God's people respond differently. God's people don't fight dirty. Because when opposition comes, the real battle isn't just out there, it's in here. Before we respond, before we hit send, before we raise our voice, we choose how we are going to respond. Nehemiah shows us, and we are going to remember this with one simple word today, how we respond to opposition as God's people, and that word is soap. And I'm going to give full credit to Pastor Godfrey for that one. He is preaching this word also over at Danforth this morning. Soap. Our first move is this. We see opposition and pray. So when opposition hits, the first thing we do is see opposition and pray. Like in the story of Nehemiah, opposition often presents itself with words. Mockery, sarcasm, discouragement. In verse 2, it says this: "What are these pathetic Jews doing?" It's words. "Can they restore it themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever even finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble?" The goal here when they say these words isn't to debate with God's people, with Nehemiah, but to defeat. It's to make them give up. If the enemy can make God's people quit early, the wall would never get built. And notice the first attack isn't physical, but verbal. It's with words. They attack their identity. These Jews, they attack their ability. They attack their motive. Opposition today for us can often sound like, do you really believe that? That's outdated, or nobody believes that anymore. It might be a comment from a classmate, a coworker, a meme, a social media post poking fun at what you believe. But no matter what, words hit hard. So how does Nehemiah respond? He prays. He prays. Nehemiah 4, verses 4-5 says, this is him praying to God. "Listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders." Nehemiah could have responded eye for eye, hurt for hurt, but instead, he prays. And take note of this prayer. It's an honest prayer, right? It's not polished. It's raw. It's how he's truly feeling. Was he affected by their insults? Yes, he was. Were their words discouraging to him and the people? Yes. But instead of responding in a way that we might naturally respond, he brings it to God. Can I just remind you this morning that God can handle your frustrations? God can handle your worries. He can handle your questions. And he's not surprised by it. He knows you. And he's not expecting you to come to him polished. One time I remember a few years ago, I was facing a trial, a really hard time in my life. And to be honest, I felt angry at God. Why was this happening? Why couldn't you stop this, God? I was just so angry. And I remember my husband, who was wise, he's listening. He looked at me and he said, "I get that you're mad at God. I get that you're angry at him, but don't stop talking to him. You can be mad at God. You can be frustrated. You can have a fist up in the air, but he gets it. He understands. You don't have to be polished to come to him." And in Psalm 62, verse 8, it says, "Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your heart before him. God is our refuge." And then in Philippians 4:6, it says, "Don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." Everything. Everything means everything. Before you defend yourself, pray. Before you respond to that text, pray. Before you post that comment, pray. Because prayer is not weakness, prayer is wisdom. I'm going to say that one more time. Prayer is not weakness. Prayer is wisdom. You don't need to have all the answers yourself. You don't have to fix it yourself. You don't have to have the right words to fix it. In fact, we'd probably mess it up if we tried. But it is wise for us to seek God's direction before reacting, before responding. He who is the ultimate source of wisdom. Prayer is not weakness. Prayer is wisdom. James 1:5. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. So when opposition shows up, see it clearly and pray first. Pray first. Don't fight dirty. Fight differently with prayer. Next, in opposition, we are invited to see opportunity and persevere. The opposition doesn't stop the work, as you'll see, but it reveals opportunity. Nehemiah 4:6 says, so we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height. For the people had the will to keep working. You notice, despite the mocking, despite the pressure, the people kept building. When we're faced with opposition, one of our most common reactions is to halt, is to stop. Stop what we're doing, and then all of our attention goes to the opposition, which is exactly what the opposition hopes we will do. Take our eyes off of what God has set before us and onto the opposition. But here, they keep going. They keep building. They keep doing what God has called them to do. They persevere. And then things intensify yet again. Have you ever felt like that? Like it's one thing after the other. You keep pushing. You're walking in obedience. The opposition hits. You keep going. And then again. Nehemiah 4:7-8, you'll see the same thing happened here. When Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to throw it into confusion. Opposition escalates when progress continues. But they persevere. They keep building. And here's one thing that I've realized in opposition. Pressure can sometimes expose weak spots. Ouch. And this is where opposition can bring forth opportunity. Sometimes pressure exposes areas where we still may need growth. We may believe and know and teach that we should respond in a way that honors God. But when faced with opposition that feels like an attack, our initial reaction can reveal something in us that still needs shaping. Trials can reveal what God is forming in us, what He's growing in us. And it's our response to that exposure that determines whether we grow or not. I'm going to say that again. It's our response to these weak spots that are being shown It's our response to that exposure that will determine whether we grow or not. Because growth is often uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable process. When we grow in God, it's chipping away at our flesh. That doesn't sound nice. It's chipping away at our flesh. And what I mean by that is that internal me-first attitude that wants life apart from God. Growth, it confronts our pride. It stretches us. But our goal is to be more like Christ. Less of me, more of him. Amen? James 1, 2-4. Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete and lacking nothing. It says, consider it a great joy when trials come, so that we can be made more like him. Trials produce endurance, and endurance produces maturity. So listen to this morning. Opposition can be a place where we become more like Christ. It also gives us an opportunity, opposition, to be a witness. How we respond to opposition shows others what we really believe. And I just don't even mean with words. How we react speaks loud. Friends notice. Family notices. The people around you notice. That when someone mocks you and you respond with grace, that speaks. When someone pressures you and you stay steady, that speaks. When someone criticizes you and you don't retaliate, that speaks. The question this morning, and this is a question I ask myself almost every day, do our reactions look like Jesus? Do how I react to opposition, to situations, does it look like Jesus to those around me? We see the opportunity, and then we persevere. Nehemiah 4:9, so we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. They never let the opposition stop them. They prayed and they prepared and they persevered. I want you to hear this morning. Opposition doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. Sometimes it means that God is strengthening you. Sometimes it means that you are being obedient, that you are building something that matters. And finally, in opposition, we can see others and prepare. As the work continues, as they continue to build and persevere in this story, you'll notice something else. The discouragement isn't just coming from the outside anymore, but it's beginning to rise within the community. Nehemiah 4:10-12 says, in Judah it was said, so these are the people, God's people who are building. It says, in Judah was said, the strength of the laborers fails. Since there is so much rubble, we will never be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemies said they won't realize it until we are among them and can kill them and stop the work. When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and time again, everywhere you turn, they attack us. This is what sustained opposition can do. It wears people down. It makes the task feel impossible. Here's God's people now saying, they're right. We can't do it. And so Nehemiah sees what's happening, and he responds both strategically and spiritually. This is what he does. It says in 4:13, "So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows." Nehemiah doesn't leave these people there just to figure it out on their own. He stations people by families to protect them. Why? Because this isn't just about finishing a wall. It's about responsibility and legacy. It's about the next generation. It isn't about just building a wall. It's about legacy, responsibility. It's all about the next generation. I picture Nehemiah, just picture this. There's rubble everywhere from the wall that once stood there. And he's walking amongst all the rubble, inspecting the walls, looking at where it still needs fixing. But as he walks, it's not the rubble he sees. He's not seeing rubble. But what he is seeing is history. These walls that were established under King David, they were expanded under King Solomon. It's the generations before him that he is seeing. And generation after generation, he knew God's people faced opposition. And generation after generation, they saw God's faithfulness. And in this moment, reminds us of this passage in Psalms. It's Psalm 48, verses 12 to 14. It says, "Go around Zion, encircle it, count its towers, note its ramparts, tour its citadels, so that you can tell a future generation, this God, our God, forever and ever, he will always lead us." God tells his people, walk the city, look carefully, remember, not for themselves, but so they can tell the next generation who their God is and what he has done. He sees the generation before, but then he also at the same time sees the future generations. Nehemiah sees the moment for what it is. And then it says in Nehemiah 4:14, "After I made the inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, 'Don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord and fight for your countrymen, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes.'" This isn't a call to anger here. It's a call to courage. Nehemiah is saying, remember who your God is. Look back. Look what God has done. And now let's respond knowing that, knowing who our God is. He's saying what we do here right now matters. What we do here right now will affect those who come after us. For the youth here today, your faith right now and how you live it out matters. And for parents and grandparents and mentors here, we have been there, right? We have faced opposition. We've walked through pressure, but we have seen God show up again and again. Amen? We have seen God's faithfulness over and over and over, and we have those stories here today. We have that testimony that he is faithful and will be faithful. But here's the thing, we have a responsibility, the word says. We have a responsibility to share that with the next generation, so that we can tell the future generations, this God, our God, he will always lead us The younger people, they need your testimony. They need it. They need your encouragement. We need to hear the stories of God's faithfulness in your life. Preparation looks like prayer. Preparation looks like God's word. And preparation looks like standing together across generations, trusting in the Lord. Because when opposition comes, God calls us not just to stand for ourselves, but to prepare others for them to stand strong too. So the wall wasn't finished yet. It's only halfway up. The threats were still real. The discouragement was still loud. The pressure had not gone away. But something had changed. They remembered the Lord. They remembered who their God was. They remember that God can bring the dead to life. Nehemiah stood up and he said, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord. Remember what he has done." And that was their turning point. Remembrance. When opposition comes, remember the Lord and respond differently. Because when you remember who your God is, you don't have to fight dirty. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to respond to every insult. You don't have to panic when pressure rises. You remember who your God is. And when you remember, you stand differently. Because the question isn't if opposition will come, but how you will respond when it does. Before we leave here today, we're going to do what Nehemiah did. We're going to remember and we're going to pray. When opposition comes, remember the Lord and respond differently.
We hope this message has empowered and encouraged you in your faith journey. For more information about Stone Church, go to stonechurch.ca.